Shapes and patterns in the stars? At first glance, the stars in our Milky Way appear to be a jumble of random lights. This study requires learning how to spot patterns and recognizable shapes in the night sky. Being able to recognize shapes and patterns is common for many scholarly studies. Before we dive into the past, let us first look at some modern examples of pattern recognition and language. First, let's consider COVID-19. COVID-19 is a coronavirus. From a language sense, did you happen to notice how the words coronavirus were interpreted differently by different people? There were those that right away related the virus to a beer. However, beer was not on the mind of the scientists who named the virus. Those who study the heavens would recognize the name corona as an event that is seen during a total solar eclipse. The corona is a name given to a star's outer atmosphere. We can see videos of our sun's corona on spaceweather.com and NASA's SOHO websites. However, the virus is not directly related or caused by the sun's atmosphere. Now, those who study language would recognize that corona is the Latin word for crown. In the 60s, the scientists that observed the virus under a microscope found that it resembled a crown and used the Latin word for crown to describe it, coronavirus. From a language standpoint, we can see how corona or crown is likened to a virus, a beer, and the solar atmosphere. It's language that ties the pattern recognition together. If we fast forward from the 60s to today, we find microscopes and computer models are able to provide a more detailed view of the virus, and crown or corona may not be the best visual description. Some more patterns and language examples could be your vehicle. Its speedometer has a needle, yet this needle is not for sewing thread. A standard car has a stick shift, yet it is a metal rod and not a wooden stick or branch. A common fern on the west coast is called a sword fern, named because of its feather-like leaves or pinnae resemble a sword. Some may see the entire fern itself resembles a sword. People use commonly known words and shape names to help with memorizing and categorizing random or new shapes. I say this because those who are unfamiliar with various languages can find the associated words strange or nonsensical or sometimes even offensive. For example, entering into a sword duel with a fern? Or it's a beer virus? Those that leverage language and words regularly associate various meanings and examples to fast-track memorization and fast-track their recognition of the random shapes and patterns. It is important to recognize various memorization and communication techniques. That is, using metaphors and narratives to help memorize something complex. Say, if you had to take your car to an auto mechanic, and the auto mechanic is having trouble explaining to you the mass, airflow, and EGR sensor values. So, instead he tells you an epic, exaggerated fantasy of why the dragon under the hood is unable to ignite his flame. After listening to his diagnosis, you realize the price is cheap because this mechanic's brain is not firing on all cylinders, and you should take your vehicle to another shop. But then, what if you realize that he is very intelligent, speaking in metaphors, and is able to fix your car faster and for less cost than any other mechanic? You find the dragon metaphor entertaining and it helps you understand what was wrong. But this could create a problem when a naive mind is unable to distinguish the boring facts from the fictitious dragon in the engine story. For them, it may be terrifying that there is a fire-breathing monster caged under the hood and living in their garage at night. They're terrified to release the park brake in case they accidentally pull the lever that opens the hood and releases the dragon. Electric vehicle car dealers, they see opportunities in this. It is an easy sell to convince the buyer that that fire-breathing dragon was living under the hood and feeds on poisonous liquid squeezed from dead, rotting organic matter. A dragon that is scheming to melt the ancient glaciers with his fiery fumes. So you ought to buy an electric car. So too, like this car example, someone who studied the stars in the past would have noticed patterns and shapes. We will be investigating if the letters and narrative contain metaphors to describe regions of the night sky. We will soon look at some memorization techniques that have been around for thousands of years. Techniques that are still commonly used today to recognize what seems like random stars and nebula shapes. When one tracks the passage of time using the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, and the Milky Way, it becomes necessary to memorize various locations and patterns of the heavens. It seems that for some of the nations, these methodologies used to track the positions of celestial movements morphed into an entertainment industry that could be sold and even worshipped. The Gentile astrological industry changed from not just tracking the time of year or tracking wet and dry seasons and when they should sow and reap. They attempted to predict future events or omens, or predict a person's characteristics and how they should behave based on where the stars are. The fictitious stories may have been a more lucrative industry compared to only suggesting the best season to plant your crops. The problem is that some people enjoy their horoscopes and enjoy the entertainment factor of the myths. Some believe that the stars are determining their character and telling them what actions to do and not do during particular periods of time. These people do not care that it has been proven multiple times that the vague horoscope predictions are not accurate. Simple experiments prove that horoscopes are wrong. Just use twins or groups of people with the same birth date. If you had 100 random people that are born on the exact same date, assigned to the Greek Leo sign, you would discover that they are not all leaders in society. I suppose the point I want to make is that this study is not intended to be a form of entertainment or horoscope-like predictions of future events. This study requires understanding that the alphabet is describing both shapes and sounds. The shapes and patterns aid us in understanding this ancient calendar system.